By the time winter arrived in full force, she already knew what it felt like to disappear while still breathing. Her name no longer mattered in the town where she was born, where her mother once sang while baking bread and her father laughed too loudly after long days of work. Loss had hollowed that place out of her life one piece at a time. First came the fever that took her parents within the same brutal week, then the debts they left behind, and finally the whispers, quiet at first, then sharp and cruel, about how she was unlucky, cursed, a reminder of sorrow no one wanted to face. When her younger sister fell ill and passed away during the early snow, something inside her finally broke beyond repair. She buried the last of her family with her own trembling hands, her fingers numb, not just from the cold, but from the unbearable truth that she was now completely alone. No inheritance, no protector, no future anyone cared to imagine for her. The house was taken, the door locked behind her as if she had never lived there at all. People turned their eyes away when she passed, afraid grief might be contagious. Hunger became a constant ache, shame a heavier burden than the sack she carried on her back. With nowhere left to sleep and no one left to beg from, she walked toward the mountains, not because she believed they would save her, but because there was nothing else. Snow began falling harder as daylight faded, each step slower than the last, until her legs finally gave out near the edge of the forest. She collapsed into the white silence, breath shallow, tears freezing on her lashes, convinced this was how forgotten people vanished, from cold, from quiet, from a world that no longer noticed they were gone. And as darkness closed in, she whispered not a prayer, but an apology for taking up space one last time. If you've ever felt unseen or abandoned, stay with this story and subscribe to the channel, because sometimes the most powerful hope is found where no one thinks to look, high above the valleys where people lived close, together yet remained strangers. The mountain man moved through the snow with practiced ease, his life shaped by isolation and necessity. He had not always lived this way. Once, long ago, he had loved deeply, too deeply. A wife with kind eyes, dreams of a child, a small home filled with plans for the future. Then came the accident, the night the river swelled and took everything in one merciless moment. Grief had taught him a lesson he never forgot. Loving meant losing, and people always left. So he turned his back on the world and climbed into the wilderness, building a life where pain could not surprise him anymore. That night, as the storm worsened beyond reason, instinct pulled him lower down the mountain than he usually traveled. He told himself it was for firewood, for checking traps, for survival. But when he saw the shape lying half buried in snow, he knew fate had followed him even here. He stood over her for a long moment, torn between habit and humanity. Helping meant responsibility. Helping meant attachment. But leaving her meant becoming something colder than the mountain itself. He knelt, felt the faint warmth still clinging to her body, and without another thought lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, like a shadow of a person, and that frightened him more than the storm. He carried her through the blinding wind to his cabin, fought through the night to keep her alive, fed her broth drop by drop, warmed her hands with his own, and waited. When she finally woke, fear filled her eyes until she saw his, not cruel, not demanding, just wary and quietly protective. Days passed in silence and cautious routine. She apologized constantly for being there, for eating his food, for breathing his air. He never told her to stop, but he never asked her to leave either. Slowly, something unfamiliar settled into the cabin. Not peace exactly, but presence. And for the first time in years, the mountain man felt the weight of loneliness lift, just enough to remind him of what it once meant to be human. If you believe even the most guarded hearts can change, subscribe now, because this story is only just beginning. As winter loosened its grip, the days inside the cabin grew warmer, though neither of them spoke about it. She regained her strength slowly, helping where she could, learning his routines, moving carefully through his space, as if afraid to shatter the fragile safety she had found. At night she lay awake listening to the wind outside, and the steady breathing of the man who had saved her, life without asking her name. He too found sleep difficult, haunted not by memories this time, but by the quiet comfort of another soul under his roof. They spoke in small ways, shared meals, exchanged glances, unspoken understanding. She told him her story in fragments, never all at once, afraid that too much truth might make him see her as a burden. He listened without interruption, without pity, and that alone felt like kindness beyond anything she remembered. for the first time since losing everything. She laughed, softly at first. Surprised by the sound of it, he found himself smiling at things he hadn't noticed in years. The way she hummed while sweeping, how she stood at the door each morning to watch the mountains, breathe under the sunrise. But fear grew alongside hope. She knew she did not belong here forever. People like him did not need people like her. One morning, while he was gone checking traps, she packed her things, convinced that leaving on her own would hurt less than being asked to go. When he returned and saw her standing there, ready to disappear again, something inside him finally broke open. He told her she wasn't a burden, wasn't an accident, wasn't a mistake the storm had dropped at his door. He told her she had brought life back into a place that had only known survival. His voice shook as he spoke, and she realized then that he was just as afraid as she was. If this moment touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, because love often grows quietly, between people who never expected it. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come, tangled with years of rejection and loss. So he stepped forward and did the one thing neither of them knew they needed. He wrapped his arms around her, firm and steady, not as a rescuer but as a man making a choice. She broke then, crying into his chest, the kind of tears that carry grief out of the body at last. He held her through it all, realizing that choosing her did not mean losing himself. It meant finally coming home. Spring arrived fully after that, the mountains blooming in quiet approval, as they built something neither had planned, but both desperately needed. She stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she was wanted. And he stayed, not hidden from the world, but rooted in a life he had chosen again. She had no one left, until the mountain man chose her. And sometimes being chosen is the greatest healing of all. If you believe in stories of hope, second chances, and love found in the most unexpected places, subscribe now, because many more unforgettable stories are waiting for you right here.